Welcome back to Reykjavik, the capital of Iceland, for the second part of Europe District. I'm in 101, the old part of town, famous for its colourful corrugated iron houses. In this part of the programme, we'll see why fishing quotas remain a bone of contention between Iceland and its European partners. We'll also meet Odni Eyre. She is a writer and environmentalist. She will show us some of Iceland's natural treasures. But let's move to our first story. Iceland is not a member of the European Union, but it belongs to the Schengen zone, the European Economic Area, as well as the Nordic Council. This type of cooperation is important, particularly for students who want to study in other European countries.
Icelandic summers are synonymous with endless days and parties. But when summer ends, many students leave Iceland for Europe. With a population of just 320,000, Iceland had for a long time just one university. Students felt they lacked choice. Even today, 3,000 young people study abroad. To help them, the government set up a special 1% student loan as a way to integrate Iceland into the EU.
We already have started to get many great things from it, like Erasmus and cooperation in studies and university, and so I think there are many good possibilities.
Many choose to study in Scandinavia. The languages and cultures are very similar. These exchanges are promoted by the Nordic Council. Krefna studies European law at Stockholm, and the specialization was chosen with an eye on the future.
I think it was an interesting subject. It's a lot related to Iceland right now because we have applied for the EU.
Yet Krefna remains unsure about Iceland joining the EU.
At the moment, no, I'm not in favor of Iceland joining the European Union, but we haven't got the final agreement yet. They're still negotiating.
Just out of their financial crisis, Icelanders are worried their small island could end up embroiled in a union with bigger problems.
This modern sculpture embodies the Viking soul of Iceland. But beyond the cliches, what do Europeans know about Icelanders? Our Brussels correspondent brought us this report.
Based in Brussels for over 7 years, Pali is a hard-working artist from Iceland. Passionate about mythology, he cultivates the art of detail. Often ironic, he enjoys the cliches about his country.
I just met somebody the other day who was a Wallonian Belgian, and he said, "Oh, it's the first time I talked to anybody from Iceland." But he knows loads of Americans. That's a 9-hour flight from here.
Although it's just a 3-hour flight from Brussels, Iceland is perceived as a faraway land.
I mean, of course, I knew about Björk. I knew that they once had 2 football players, a father and son, who played on the national team at the same time. I know that they mostly live in Reykjavik. And there's a lot of kind of rough countryside that includes volcanoes.
Guðni Rosa is also an Icelander. She's lived in Brussels since '95. Married to a Belgian painter, she's developed her own artistic universe. Very clean, she brushes lightly to better preserve the ephemeral beauty of things.
Oui, ça fait partie de...
Yes, that is part of my Iceland. I think there's a kind of fascination with Iceland. And it's not just cliches, not like it was 16 years ago. Now I think it's a more mystical feeling.
I think people have been talking more about Iceland in the last few years. We have a more focused stance on nature conservation, the use of energy. All these things have fascinated the world, and especially Europe.
The land of fire and ice is indeed fascinating, but remains a mystery to most Europeans.
Our reports there on how Icelanders view the European Union and vice versa. Let's meet our next guest in the programme. Össur Skarphéðinsson is a staunch supporter of EU integration. He is the Foreign Minister of Iceland. Mr. Skarphéðinsson, why are you so convinced that it's time for Iceland to join the European Union?
Well, first, we are European, we belong there. But secondly as well, despite all the bad news about the euro, it is the view of the Icelanders that they can't continue into the future with the present currency. They need a new currency that will be stable as the euro will be in the future. But as well, we need foreign investment, and experience shows that when small states join the European Union, foreign investments, especially from other countries in the EU, they follow.
Had Iceland been in the Eurozone at the time, would the crisis have been smoother?
Definitely, we would not have seen the greatest hardship that was caused by the fact that loans that were taken by the citizens in foreign currencies really mutated overnight, doubled in size. So I think the worst excesses of the crisis would have been avoided.
In the first part of the program, we met the president of Iceland. He mentioned you, he said, you will have a hard time convincing Icelanders to join the European Union. How will you convince them?
Well, my friend the president knows that I have sometimes in the past cracked tough nuts. It will be difficult to convince the people as of now, but I'm absolutely certain that when the problems of the euro have been solved and we have the possibility of getting rid of the Icelandic krona that led us to a lot of problems and adopt the euro in future, I don't think that will be too difficult. And don't forget that just a few years back there was a strong majority in Iceland for adopting the euro, for joining the European Union.
Iceland's fishermen are among the most Eurosceptic in the country. How do you hope to convince them?
Well, it's not really the fishermen. The strongest lobby in Iceland are the fishing vessels owners, and they want to sit alone in Iceland and don't have any competition, understandably. What they're also afraid of is that if we join the EU, we will have an armada coming from Spain and Portugal and stealing all our fish. That is the legend that is going around, and this legend can only be put to death at the negotiation table.
Össur Skarphéðinsson, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The fishing industry accounts for 40% of Iceland's exports, but whale hunting and fishing quotas have long been a bone of contention between Iceland and its European partners. Reykjavik's unilateral decision to increase its mackerel quotas has angered Brussels. European deputies are demanding sanctions, and some fear this dispute has the capacity to derail accession talks. Well, our reporter met with Iceland's fishermen. She brought us this report.
No need to travel far to fish for mackerel. Halldor sets his lines and the fish are biting like crazy. But Mother Nature's bounty is causing tensions. For the past 2 years, global warming has pushed mackerel into Icelandic waters, cutting into the supply of other European fishermen.
Our neighbours envy us, but this is a species that just arrived in Icelandic waters. Of course they dislike it, but the mackerel's in our fishing areas and our business is fishing. Why shouldn't we be allowed to fish in our own waters?
Ireland, France, as well as Spain and Portugal are leading the charge in the so-called mackerel war. Their argument, a failure to comply with European quotas set up for the species' survival. Halldor, like many Icelandic fishermen, says that's not the case.
We're not overfishing. We have 500 to 600 kilograms in each bin, and there are 11 bins on board. I don't catch more than 3 to 4 tons of fish a day.
Back in Reykjavik, the fishing ministry is convinced Icelandic policy is better than EU legislation on this issue.
We have our own label, Icelandic Responsible Fisheries. We have shown through history that we manage our stocks well. We, as a fishing nation, are very dependent on fisheries. We know the importance of doing this the right way. And I think it's generally acknowledged that the Icelandic system is by far more efficient and better than, for example, the EU fishing.
But the EU suffers a credibility problem as it tries to revamp its outdated fishing policy.
This is first of all on our side, that the EU is still working on the next generation fisheries policy. And of course, we don't know yet what will be the outcome. So we negotiate based on the present legal base.
The fishing issue remains one of the biggest obstacles in the accession talks with Brussels. Some fear it could sink Iceland's bid to join the EU.
And it's time to meet our next guest in the program On the Air. She is a philosopher and writer. With her friend, the musician Björk, she launched a campaign called Natura to promote Iceland's nature. Odni, very nice to meet you. Very nice to meet you. We are here in Grotta, right?
Yes, it's a beach, almost in the center of Reykjavik. So I come here very often, and if the tide is low, you can go out to the little island of the lighthouse, and there are many birds over there. It's mostly the home of the Arctic stern. It flies all the way from the southern Arctic.
And you never come here alone. I can see your dog.
Yes.
What's his name?
Very proud of my dog. His name is Kolur. It's a long-haired shepherd. He's here with me because he likes running fast.
The sea's quiet and beautiful, but I guess it must be very cold.
Yeah, like my friends, some of them, they swim there every week, like 3 times a week. But it's too cold for me. But this is something new, like what the parachutes. I've never seen that before. That must be like a new sport that they are starting.
We left Reykjavik for the coastal town of Eyrarbakki.
Yeah, I always come here for an inspiration. It's like the Association of Writers. They have a house here, so that you can rent it for very cheap. So in the winter time and in the summertime, it's like equally good, because in the winter time you see a lot of aurora borealis here, and in the summertime the sea is wonderful, and there are several walking paths. And there is also this tradition of writers coming here to find peace, to write.
With 3 persons per square kilometre, there's plenty of space in Iceland, and it looks to me that Icelanders love isolation. They love to be on their own.
Maybe because we are spoiled by the emptiness. You know, we go to our favorite place in nature, and we are used to being there alone. So if there is somebody else, we must find another place. So now there are lots of tourists coming to Iceland now, after the crisis especially, because this is maybe our main industry. And so that I think it will be a little bit problematic for Icelanders to get used to that, you know.
Only this is one of the treasures of Iceland, the waterfalls of Gullfoss.
I'm always impressed by it. I like to go down there and be very close to it, because it's the sound also. So there were always these tales about people looking into the waterfalls and getting hypnotized, and then, you know, jumping in somehow, wanting to like join the current.
Well, precisely, there's an almost suicidal story attached to this place.
There was this woman that was born and bred here in the neighborhood called Sigríður. In the 20s, I think, when they wanted to sell the rights to a foreign company to build a huge dam here, she walked all the way on her own to Reykjavik, told them that she would suicide, like threatened them, that she would jump into the waterfall if they would destroy it. She is the first environmentalist of Iceland. So we remember her like with respect today.
Odni, we're here in the house of Iceland's most celebrated writer. It's, of course, Halldor Laxness, who won the Nobel Prize in Literature. That was in 1955.
He was a great writer and a funny man, also a little bit of a dandy, and he was concerned by everything. And his house was like a meeting place of artists, of politicians, of a lot of foreigners, of scientists. So like everybody came here. Now it's turned into a museum, and you can feel his presence.
Is Laxness still an inspiration for you?
For me personally, and I think for my generation, he is also, besides being a good writer, he is also an inspiration as an environmentalist. He wrote those articles that mattered, and in the 70s, when they were thinking of sinking a big part of Iceland, or like making reservoirs of water to make electricity for the aluminium smelters, he just saw that this was nonsense. And the funny thing is that when you read those articles, they are still very valid, unfortunately, you know, for our situation in Iceland now.
We're back in central Reykjavik to meet a young Icelandic band called Yodeling. There's something striking about Iceland. 300,000 people, so many famous bands. How do you explain this?
I think maybe the fact that our singer Björk made it so far that she made the road for the others. Also, we have this strong tradition of coming together and singing and making music, maybe much stronger than coming together and discussing things. And here they are. Yodeling.
Sigridur, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And Gumi?
Yes.
When you travel abroad, I know you're going to the Czech Republic tomorrow. Are you perceived as part of this Icelandic wave?
Yeah, we are, because we are an Icelandic band. The Icelandic soul is just a bit up and down. You know, it's like a bipolar person because of cold winters and bright summers. So we go up and down, and you know, like the nature, I guess you could say.
We will finish the show in music. You will sing an old song that was written in Icelandic about this beautiful city of Reykjavik. But before we listen to your song, I'd like to say thank you to Odni and Kolur, who is already sleeping here. It was a wonderful walk. Thank you for watching this edition of Europe District from Iceland. We'll return in September as we continue our tour across Europe. Now it's time for I Reykjavíkur borg.
Koma tímar, koma ráð,